First Person Advisors is now a subsidiary of NFP, the fifth largest insurance broker in the world, combining local expertise with access to global capabilities and solutions. Learn more at firstpersonadvisors.com.
Now Wish TV introduces Telephone, a state-of-the-art polling system that gives you the chance to be heard.
That was Eric Halvorson back in the mid-'80s, behind the anchor desk, in what would become a 3-decade career delivering news to central Indiana.
Chris Fitzgerald often has the Wabash River to himself because it can be too shallow for anything but his hovercraft.
Good afternoon, I'm Eric Halvorson. It's 68 degrees at Wish TV.
Live from your 24-hour news source, Wish TV. This is 24-hour News 8 at 5:30.
Halvorson's knack for storytelling and smooth delivery propelled him to land one of the biggest media jobs in Indianapolis in 2004. He took the reins as main anchor at Wish TV after the legendary Mike Ahern retired.
This is not the end of anything. Let's call it a turning of the page to a new chapter of the life of this station. There's Eric there. Eric's going to be sliding in this chair tomorrow. Of course, Eric and Debbie have been doing this since May at the 11 o'clock news in the evening. So it's an anchor team that you've become familiar with, and I know that you've learned to trust them as well.
Halvorson went on to spend more than a decade in that main anchor chair before moving on to the other side of the camera, where he took a new role sharing the story of the nation's largest supermarket chain. A familiar face to Hoosiers, longtime Indianapolis journalist, Emmy Award winner, now in charge of spreading the word about Kroger. I'm talking with Eric Halvorson on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast. Hello and welcome to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. I'm Gary Dick. Eric Halvorson made several stops before his family set up roots here in Indianapolis. He was born in France. His family came back to the U.S. and spent much of his early years in the Land of Lakes, Minnesota, before the Halvorson family eventually moved to Indianapolis when Eric was a senior in high school. He graduated from Lawrence Central High School, went on to Butler University, where he took an interest in politics and media. He earned a bachelor's in radio and TV and a master's in history and political science. Eric left the Wish TV anchor desk in 2015, a tough decision to step away from the only profession he had known. He's now putting his 30-plus years in TV news to use on the other side of the camera at Kroger, where he serves as manager of corporate affairs. And I'm very pleased to be joined on the Business and Beyond podcast this week by Eric Halvorson. Eric, great to be with you, connect with you again. How are you?
Well, doing fine. I'm flattered to be here as part of your podcast. Just thinking of the number of people who've been here ahead of me and the quality of those people, their achievements. I am truly flattered to be on the list of your guests. This is great. Thank you.
Well, I've been looking forward to this since we set it up. You know, I was looking at your background and your early years, you know, the Johnny Cash song, I've Been Everywhere, Man. I think you could kind of, say that as well. You really moved around a lot. I thought it was interesting. You were actually born in France.
Right. Yep. Came along toward the end of my dad's tour in France. Mom and Dad went to Europe without me and came back with me. So we were not a military family after that, but we did move around a fair amount after our first stop in Minnesota. Ultimately, Dad came here to work for Lilly and finished his career with what was Upjohn in Kalamazoo. I got off the bus here after Lawrence Central, as you said, going to Butler, and was very fortunate to be here working for the old Channel 4 when Cowboy Bob was there.
Oh, yeah.
Terry was there. So had a great time learning the news business there, shot film there back in the days of film. There's an old story the news director used to tell about the chief engineer there saying they were not going to shoot videotape because videotape was a fad. So we were sticking with film. So we finally made the transition and then moved to Channel 8 in 1983. So I was very lucky not to have to jump around from market to market in TV. My jumping was 2 stations within Indianapolis, but doing a lot of different things along the way.
That's interesting. Well, to go back to those really early years, how long were you in France? Do you remember anything about France?
No.
Yeah.
I was probably, I bet I wasn't even a year old when we got back. So all I know is from the pictures Mom and Dad have showed me.
Yeah. So it sounds like so much of your formative years were in Minnesota.
Yes. Yeah. We lived in southwestern Minnesota. One interesting story out of that is too, when my family was there, my dad grew up in southeastern South Dakota. My dad played high school football against Jim Shella's dad, if you remember Jim Shella from Wish TV. Yeah, there's another small world story that just fascinates all of us as we talk about it. But we were all from roughly that same area, and we moved a couple of times, St. Louis, New Jersey, then back to South Central Minnesota before coming here. So yeah, as you said, the land of 10,000 lakes was home before coming here. But it was very much like living in Indianapolis. It's Midwest.
Yeah. So you spent 1 year of high school at Lawrence Central, your senior year.
Right.
What was, did you play sports, music? Do you have any extracurricular activities?
Mine would have been more on the nerd side than the athlete side. So I was more of the AV club guy, videotaping the games and doing some audio-visual work that, come to think of it, actually won an award in a high school broadcasting competition.
Wow.
So yeah, I had that blue ribbon on my wall for quite a while. And so that was my extracurriculars. I was not and am still not an athlete, although I try to pretend whenever I used to run the mini marathon.
Good. Teachers obviously are so instrumental in shaping lives every day. And I know in doing some research, was there a teacher at Lawrence Central that kind of steered you toward media, a career in media?
You have done your research. Yes, I can think of a couple of teachers. Back in Minnesota, there was a teacher named Dale McMahon who was the head of our radio program there. But here in Indianapolis at Lawrence Central, it was Gary Nash. And he was just a remarkable teacher, cared about his students. And he was a Butler guy, helped me find Butler, and just kind of shepherded me along the way. And I will always be grateful to him for, I'm sure I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for him helping me get the start I had.
Yeah. So when you got into media at Butler, I mean, did you immediately think, hey, I want to be a news guy, I want to be a news reporter, or what was the thought process?
Well, for me, my first thought was I wanted to be a doctor, and then I took chemistry in high school and realized I needed to reevaluate my goals. So as we were moving in, the same time I was taking chemistry, our high school in Minnesota had the first high school radio station in the state.
Wow.
So I was able to be the station manager for that little radio station. And I learned I wasn't really good at sales, but I did enjoy the news side. And from there, when I realized medical school wasn't for me, the immediate backup was to say, I want to get into broadcasting, and I wanted to do the news.
Yeah. And it sounds like you had an interest in politics, and you must have been a good student too, because you got your undergrad and you got a master's at Butler as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. I sometimes joke that the fraternity at Butler may have kept me in just to help me, that I could help them keep the grade point average up. So, because again, as somebody who I was doing a double major, so my time to be part of the fraternity and fraternity life was limited. So that's where I contributed, because a lot of times I was in the radio and TV studio. At that point at Butler, it was really just a radio studio. When we were doing our TV classes, we went to the dental school at IUPUI.
Okay. Now, what fraternity were you in?
Sigma Chi.
Sigma Chi. Okay. Any good stories from your Sigma Chi days? It sounds like you studied a lot and you were not at the house maybe a lot at party time, but do you have any Any fun? I'm sure you had a few fun times.
Yeah, I part of it was just watching the other guys and thinking, how come I'm not more like them? And because it probably will surprise no one that I was straight-laced then, because I'm fairly straight-laced now. But I did enjoy just getting out, and we had derby days and chariot races. They had in the parking area, the chariot race through the parking lot at Butler was one of the highlights of, I think, homecoming year. Homecoming every year. So those were fun, and just being part of the radio station, I think was really the highlight for me, because I had a broadcast that I enjoyed on Saturday mornings on the old WAJC, which is 104.5 now, WJJK. And my show was the archives on Saturdays playing the oldies. And they weren't quite as old then as they are now, but it was 60s rock, 50s rock. And there were a couple of people who called every Saturday to place the same request, because my station was the only place where they could hear a couple of these songs. So those were fun days.
Yeah. And, I think we might have a connection, because I was a Phi Delt. So I think Sigma Chi Phi Delt and Beta make up the Miami Triad.
Yes.
Yes.
I'd forgotten that term, but yes.
I still remember that. Hey, was there a point in college when it really clicked and you really got excited and thought, man, I really want to do this TV thing, this reporting thing? I mean, there was for me. I remember being in college and, doing internships and getting jobs at radio stations, and I just couldn't wait to get out. I got excited. Was there a moment when that kind of clicked for you?
A couple things are flashing through my head as you say that. So being able to do news conferences and be around guys like when I was an intern, basically as an intern at Channel 4, WTTV, being around guys, your old colleagues like Jack Reinhart and Norman Cox, seeing some of the people that I watched every day. But the real click was when Ronald Reagan was running for president, was making a stop in Kokomo. And I was on the press bus with local reporters, but I was also seeing national reporters, people I was watching and had admired for a number of years. And I was riding on the bus with them.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's so cool. This is where I want to be. And I was able to be about 6 feet. I got within 6 feet of Ronald Reagan as a candidate, started reaching for a microphone to ask him a couple of questions, and the security guys came over and said, no questions. So I thought, well, okay, I'm still this close. And that was the moment where I said, I'm in the right place.
That is cool. So it's interesting then, when you graduated from Butler, did you go right to Channel 4?
Yes. Yeah. I was fortunate in their newsroom was small enough at the time that when they didn't fill one of the full-time positions and didn't have another intern coming in, I said, I'm available. So I worked part-time at Channel 4 in the newsroom through senior year and went full-time upon graduation. And I was there for 3 years before moving to Wish. So I was my own photographer in those days. You remember the photographer days. So I did that for a number of years, and even got to shoot the Indy 500 once from the winner's circle. And Johnny Rutherford won that year, and he held up a 3, and I zoomed in on the hand holding the 3 with the Borg Warner trophy. I was so proud, and I thought that's the perfect closing shot, and the director faded to black before we got to that shot. I was very disappointed, because that was the shot.
That is perfect. Yeah. Hey, and you mentioned it earlier, but man, you were at Channel 4. For people who don't know today, maybe what an iconic station that was, and how many personalities and shows from kids shows to Sammy Terry to the news to IU basketball. I mean, Channel 4 was quite a place.
Yeah, and Sammy Terry used to walk in full gear in full Sammy Terry costume in the newsroom. I think he used to smoke cigarettes talking to Jim Lockwood and Jeannie Raymond, the news director and assignment editor, and they would shoot the breeze. Jim Gerard, if you remember Jim Gerard.
Yeah, sure.
And Cowboy Bob was a director at the station in addition to being the character on the air. And he used to, I remember one year he sent out he was a scuba diver, sent out a Christmas card with a picture of a crab underwater. And his caption was "Merry Christmas from Sandy Claus," CLAWS. So lots of fun people and fun memories. And if I'm remembering correctly, Sammy's casket was kept under the time clock where we checked out. We still had time cards in those days. So
no kidding.
Check out there before we'd see where Sammy checked out.
That is great. Well, what I remember, I tell you, is Janie, Popeye and Janie. Growing up in Clinton, Indiana, I can still remember as a little guy being glued to the TV, and I always remember because the address of Channel 4 was 3490 Bluff Road, right?
Bluff Road, right?
And I remember that because you could send in your coloring pictures all that. So that's kind of stuck with me. So how'd you get to Wish? I mean, just you looking for that next move?
Yes, there was. Well, in a sense, there's another link to Jim Shella because I applied once, didn't get the job that I was initially aiming for. Jim got that one. There was another position that opened a few months later, and then I did get the opportunity. So I tried a couple of times to get into Wish, and the second time was the charm. So it was a reporting position. Working weekends. The hours didn't matter to me. I just wanted to be there. So it was a weekend. I said, wherever you want me to go, I'm fine. So it was weekend assignment editor. And Lee Giles, the news director, presented it as a sort of management position. And I thought, well, if it was that good a position, somebody else would have taken it. So it just meant that I needed to come in earlier and start organizing the day and newsprint as it was coming in off the old teletypes. So, but it was a great place to be.
Well, did you so assignment editor, that's a tough job. You really get your hands in the day to day. Did you answer? I've always said everyone should have the opportunity to answer the phone in a TV newsroom. Did you spend any time answering the phones there in the newsroom?
Yes. Well, yes. And sometimes in those days, we weren't always a 24-hour newsroom. So we would set up the phone to forward to home. So I would occasionally get some interesting phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. But the phone calls that came in were always unpredictable.
Right.
Because it would be, I remember one time I had just done a news break and I had a shirt with 2 pockets on it, one on each side. And the caller didn't have a question about the news. He would say, "Where do I get that shirt?" So you never quite know what you're going to have to answer. But the fact that they were watching and that curious, we just always figured that's a positive. We're connecting with the community. So answer them all. Although Mike Ahern did, I think it was Mike saying anybody who owns a telephone should not own a television because because they don't go together sometimes.
Yeah, that is absolutely a great assessment from Mike there. Hey, we're going to have much more with Eric Halvorson coming up on the Business and Beyond podcast. We're going to talk about taking over for the legend, Mike Ahern, and also the transition from TV to his current role at Kroger. That and much more when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
First Person Advisors is now a subsidiary of National Financial Partners, the 5th largest insurance broker and consultant in the world. Develop your total reward strategies all in one place with the combination of First Person's local expertise and NFP's global resources and integrated solutions. Learn more at firstpersonadvisors.com.
Welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is Eric Halvorson. He's the manager of corporate affairs for Kroger's Central Division, but also, as many people remember, his great 30-plus year career in television news here in Indianapolis. And Eric, thinking back on that, you were a great reporter, always had some great stories. Any stories? I mean, I get asked that sometime, and I can never... I've got a great memory, but I can never pinpoint a story that in particular was special to me. Was there any story that you did in your reporting days that you really look back on with fond memories?
Wow. Well, I suppose there are some fond memories and not so fond memories. The biggest story I think I ever did was one that took me across to the other side of the world after the tsunami in Southeast Asia.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
2005. We went over, Tom Cochran was our news director then, and he thought, let's go over to Sri Lanka. Jim Morris was head of the World Food Program at the time. So we thought we would follow him into tsunami country. And that was one of the most fascinating whirlwind couple of days. We went over, met him in Rome, interviewed him in Rome, followed him to Sri Lanka. We flew in a Sri Lankan Air Force helicopter into rebel territory. There was one point where we were flying over the Sri Lankan jungle, and I'm looking down, seeing temples of, I wasn't sure which church or which religious body was represented, but I thought, I'm just a guy from Indiana. I'm flying over a jungle in Sri Lanka. And it just struck me as, what are the odds that I would be doing this? So there are moments like that. And there was one time, and this is just one of the strange stories, we were doing a repaving on East Washington. And it was a story about repaving, I think the state highway, but there was somebody who took exception to us being out there because he was convinced we were only doing that because we were trying to help Bill Hudnut get reelected. And he came up with his fists toward me.
Oh, wow.
To fight. Yeah. So we got out of there before he was able to do anything. But you see, again, I know you've felt some of the same things too. People get temperamental about different things. And so that's another, I don't know why that one stuck with me, but that's just another odd moment from what TV people can encounter at different times.
Yeah. What do you think about TV news today, versus, 20 years ago? Obviously it's changed. Everything changes. But you mentioned, taking that trip that you took around the globe to cover a story. And I think all the stations here in Indianapolis would on occasion, do those types of things and spend the money to go where the story was. It's different. It's always been a bottom line business, but I think today, more than ever, that's what it is. And I think coverage can suffer. Your take, what's your take, Eric?
Yeah, I think some of the same things. I'm sure a lot of the reporters today would express similar frustrations as we look back and see how much it has changed, because I listen to them sometimes and commiserate with them about how much the dollar has dictated the direction of the news business right now. And I don't want to sound too critical of the way things are, because I was a young reporter once and I was constantly trying to get better. And we knew there were things that could improve. But to me, as we look at the situation and cutbacks in a number of areas, I think we as viewers lose because the reporters are not necessarily making enough money for them to want to stay here as you did and I did and our colleagues at Wish and Channel 13 and WRTV, because a lot of us made this home and were able to put stories into context that I'm not sure some people will be able to do if a story today or if a job today is just getting them to the next 2-year contract somewhere else. So I would like to see the reporters paid enough that they're comfortable staying here and connect with the community and want to be here. I've talked to a few who say this is where they want to be. So I think that's better for them in the long run for the development of a career and solid journalistic background, and better for us as viewers if we have people who really know why something is important and they're not just telling us what happened, but telling us why we need to know this information.
Yeah. Had a great reporting career out on the street, and then came the opportunity. A real broadcasting legend in this community, Mike Ahern, for so many years on the anchor desk there at Wish, announced he was retiring. How did that all come about? That you were selected to really be the guy to step in and fill in for Mike?
Yeah, I think I might have just been the last warm body they hadn't tried. But I will go back to a reference to Tom Cochran, because I think Lee Giles and Tom Cochran were my advocates going into this, and they were trying to figure out at different times who might be able to replace Mike. And one or both of them talked to the GM at some point and said, you don't really, and I just heard this, I don't remember which of them told me this, but they talked to the general manager and said, you really don't need to be looking out of town for your next anchor. And between the two of them, they were able to help me move into that position and prepare me for the job. They structured it in a way that I could work certain hours with Mike, or take the, say, the late evening. So he would work the early afternoon into the early newscast, and then I would work the late newscast so people would get more familiar with me in that role. And then when he retired, then I could move in, and it seemed more natural to people because they were familiar with me at 11 in that job. That job, being a main anchor at any station in a market of this size, it's a big job, and it comes with its share of pressure and those types of things. But succeeding someone of Mike's stature, did that add any pressure to it, or make you feel different? Yeah, definitely, because he actually had earned legend status. Everybody knew who he was, and he'd written books. He had just accomplished so many things. And it was when we were getting started, it was Mike and Howard Caldwell and a couple of different people at Channel 13. So there were certain names and certain faces that everybody knew they could rely on. And Mike was one of those. So to think I was following him in that position was incredibly challenging, and in some ways a little intimidating, because I didn't want to be the person who, oh, hey, you let us down.
Right.
I think a lot of the success that followed is a credit to having worked with Debbie Knox and Angela Buckman, Anthony Calhoun. We were all part of the team at the anchor desk, and Patty Spittler before that. So having all of those people as the team at Wish, it wasn't entirely on my shoulders to be the next Mike Ahern.
Yeah. You mentioned some great names there, and I've always been of the opinion that successful anchor teams, not always, but many times, if they get along off camera, or kind of friend, I wouldn't say close friends, but they interact together, that shows on the air. I think you guys probably had a pretty good relationship off the air too.
Yeah, very much so. I remember my first anchor job at Wish was the Weekends with Tina Cosby, and we were sent to talk to a consultant, the first time I'd ever worked with a consultant. And she was amazed that two people, Tina and I, actually did get along, because she said, I don't see that very often. So we were fortunate that we were friends from off the air as well as on the air. And I think you're right. It does reflect in how we worked on the air. Patty and I were like that, got to the point where she could sense when I was running out of steam or my thoughts were starting to end, so she could pick up. We did cover for each other very well that way, learned each other's speech patterns and rhythms. And Debbie and I think we're the same way. So great teams along the way. And I think the chemistry of the full group, in my opinion, is more important than just one person.
Yeah. Yeah. How long were you on the anchor desk and as the main anchor?
10. Yeah, I think it was right at 10 years.
About 10 years. So you had a really great run. And I know, again, in doing a little bit of the research that ended, you said it was a business decision that the station made. Tell me about that process, what that was like, and kind of your thoughts back then. Right.
Well, I'm smiling a little bit because another memory just clicked. You remember Chris Duffy?
Sure. Yeah.
PM at Channel 13 and I think Fox 59.
Yeah. In fact, he was one of the founders of Channel 59.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I ran into him at church once, and he pulled me aside and said, "You ever been fired?" And I said no. And he said, "Don't worry, you will be." And I thought, yeah, well, maybe not, because at that point I know I was old enough to think I might have gotten over the hump. And I might be okay. And then after Wish lost the CBS affiliation and started recalculating some things, my contract expired. I became a convenient target as the old timer with a little bigger salary and 5 weeks of vacation. So when the contract expired, I say I wasn't fired. They just didn't renew my contract, but we all know what that means.
Yeah.
So they didn't renew my contract, and I was bitter about it for a while. One of the interesting elements of that, though, was the number of times I would go different places and talk to people who would say the same thing happened to me, and it didn't hurt as much when I thought, there are other people who've faced similar trials, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that came up to teach at the University of Indianapolis. Did that for a little bit. One class, 13 or 15 students. That gave me a much bigger appreciation for the work of teachers, because I had a class 1 hour, 3 days a week. And to think about how much prep time went into that, I thought teachers do this every day for 8 hours a day. So they have my undying admiration. Worked for Channel 20 as a producer for a bicentennial show. So that was a nice opportunity. I loved the idea that I could work in a longer format than the minute and a half we traditionally had in TV. So that was a nice change of pace. Getting the job at Kroger proved to be the perfect blend of experience for me, because I love Indiana, loved Indianapolis, didn't want to go someplace and start over at my advanced age. So I just thought this is where I wanted to be. And as we talked about, being able to tell stories about a company as wonderful as Kroger, staying in Indianapolis was just perfect.
Yeah. Well, you landed in a great position with a great company. Many people in TV, they get out of TV and they miss TV. They miss being on the air, whatever the case might be. Did you ever miss it, or was it just a great time to transition into something new and something different for you?
I do miss it sometimes. Election night, I love election night, being part of that excitement. I miss being at the Speedway on race day. That was always fun, being out there first thing in the morning. So I do miss those things. There's a lot of it I don't miss. Maybe this is unfair, but I call it the artificial breaking news. If it was breaking at midnight and we're still calling it breaking news at 6 o'clock in the morning, is it still breaking? So I don't miss some of that. But some of what we see here, well, I still get to, this is our studio in the Kroger division office in Castleton. So I still, if I really need to sit under lights and sit at an anchor desk, I get to do that right now. And being part of TV, I don't appear on any of our broadcasts anymore, but we have plenty of, I've had my time. So it's not like I'm desperate to get on TV anymore. I'm content to help other people get on TV and tell the story that Kroger has, because right now that's more important than me and my ego.
Yeah, again, 30 years in television, great career in that industry, but you went into this job, important job. a lot of transferable skills, I guess, but this is was something completely new to you, right? When you took it, I mean, did you ever have any nervousness about, hey, I don't know, well, can I do this job?
I shouldn't say this, but sometimes I still do have that nervousness several years into it, because there are still things that come up. And I think this wasn't what I learned at Butler. This was never part of a radio or TV class. So I manage a budget, multi-million-dollar budget now. I know the state of Indiana by the food banks we support.
Yeah.
There are so many different elements of the job that I had never imagined. And it's interesting to think, somebody told me early on, you're a business executive now. And I thought, I'm just a reporter. Well, yes, I am. I guess I am.
Yeah, right.
I have an office. I have a door now. I never had a door. So that was pretty special too. So yeah, I am very grateful to the people at Kroger who grew up in this business or have spent their entire careers here and have been patient with me and pulled me along and say, this is what we do and this is why we do it. There are about 6 pages of Kroger acronyms I have yet to learn. So I'll forever be grateful to the people who have tolerated me as I try to learn the business, because there's a lot to it. It's a lot faster paced than most people would imagine.
Yeah, and very much a changing business. You've got a front row seat to this evolution, really, in the supermarket business and how we get our food. And Kroger obviously is a massive company on a national scale into so many things beyond food as well. Give us your take on kind of the future of the supermarket business and the way things are evolving now. How would you describe the business?
I would say we will see more in the digital, the Kroger pickup, the grocery delivery side of it, the e-commerce side. We're constantly developing that. We just recently opened a store in Brownsburg, brand new store, new design. That tells us that there is still a role for brick and mortar. There is still going to be a store in our lives, but the opportunity to have groceries delivered to your home rather than have you go pick them up is, I think, going to be an expanding element of what the grocery business requires anymore, because the element of convenience is so important to people. At the beginning of the pandemic, our e-commerce director just in our division said her word was astronomical. The increase in demand for Kroger pickup, the curbside pickup, which we used to call Click List, has become Kroger pickup. The increase in demand for that was such that probably last year reached the level that we were predicting would be our level of business 5 years from now.
Wow.
So it's pulled back a little bit, I think, since then, but I also believe that is a bigger direction. You'll see more Kroger delivery vans now. The technology side of Kroger, we already have some vans getting out into the community now to deliver food. You can go online, order groceries, and they will be picked by robots in another community, put on a semi, rolled into a spoke here in Indianapolis, and then be delivered to any of 30 zip codes, and that will expand as the service grows. But something, if anybody needs some time to just look at the direction of technology at Kroger, go online and look up Ocado, O-C-A-D-O. And the Today Show did something on it say back in July or August, that gives you a really excellent idea of the direction of technology and the influence that's going to have on the grocery business in the very near future.
Yeah, fascinating. What's next for Eric Halvorson? I know you've got a lot going on at Kroger. You've also got some grandkids you're chasing around, right? So I know family's important to you, and you've got family right here in Central Indiana.
I still think I have the energy to keep going for a few more years. I'm not ready to retire. I know there were a few people, one person in particular, who said working at a grocery store will be a nice retirement job for you. And I think, come
Yeah,
on,
right.
follow anybody at Kroger for a day and see if you're calling it a retirement job. But
Yeah.
I'd like to think I have several more years left. And because my family has a pretty good history of longevity, my grandma made it to 102 years old. So
Wow.
I want to make sure my nest egg is a little bigger before I hang up the clipboard or put the microphone and keyboard away.
Very good. Well, Eric Halvorson, it's been a real treat to catch up with you. A wonderful broadcasting professional, and you're exhibiting all those great traits in the supermarket business at Kroger as well. You're a class guy. Really appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm grateful.
All right. And thank you for listening to this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast. It's presented by PNC, a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can check out all of our episodes at InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.